Hey folks, Eshan LaCoste here from All Wyse Transformation, where we talk about mental health, spiritual practice, and self-care. And as always, I want folks to use this platform as a place to get information. And so if you're seeking more information, I advise folks to go for professional support when it comes to your mental health, because this is just a place for information gathering. So today, I have an awesome guest with me. We're going to talk about some really interesting stuff in regards to what does it mean to take care of yourself in sort of like a really sex positive way. Jay, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Jay, and I've been invited here to talk about my place in the leather and kink world and some of my experiences.
Nice, nice. So I met Jay at a workshop years ago, and you sort of introduced me into this whole new way of thinking and being in my body. So Jay, do you mind sharing like how you got started in the kink community?
Well, I guess my interest goes way back. When I was young and when I was growing up, a lot of the gay representation just wasn't there, except aside from, the Paul Lynns and the other, hyper feminine role models that were taught me that it was okay to be gay if you were funny. There were no role models that taught me it was okay for you to be gay if you were sexy. So some of the things that I would see in the corners of bookstores were some of the Tom of Finland imagery, that showed a masculine side of gayness. And, I think that piqued my interest early on. I picked up a few leather things when I was in my 20s, but, life in your 20s is school and work, and I'm poor, and, the house. It wasn't until later on that I had more time and means to get involved in the leather community and do a little bit of more shopping in places where you could go and actually get some things, which you couldn't find locally.
Yeah, yeah, and I think the comfortability of having this kind of conversation. I think a lot of people feel like it's sort of like you should be hushing it or it should be some sort of secret. And
Right.
so I'm curious about what are your thoughts about like being out and open with it
Yeah.
and sort of just having conversations.
Well, everybody is sexual, and I think that we can all relate on some level to that. So that's the base level. And then, a lot of people think, I'm the kinkiest because of my experience in the leather community. All of my, kinky friends think I'm the most vanilla, and all the muggles think I'm the kinkiest. But, I'm open to hearing things, and I've always listened to podcasts like Dan Savage. And, before I was out of the closet, I would get, couples magazines so that people didn't necessarily know I was gay, and they talked a lot more about how to treat people than, not as objects, but as whole people. And, I think I learned a lot from that.
I think the workshop that I did with you was, forgive me if I'm screwing this, it's a
No,
Shibari,
I'm sorry.
where it's a Shibari. Am I saying that
Yeah,
right? With the
Shibari
rope.
is a Japanese style rope bondage. And I've done a couple
Yeah. So
classes in that, yeah.
how'd you get into that? Like, what was the pull
Well,
to
no, that
that?
was a little bit accidental. I got into that one time. My husband and I, we're married now, but at the time we were engaged. And we were playing around one time, and he just tied me to a chair out of a very amateur nothing, and we had a little bit of fun with that. And we both found it really erotic and intriguing. And then, I did take some classes at some other places just because I was intrigued at Eastern Mountain and Bound in Boston. And the more I learned and practiced, the more I wanted to show people the simple things I'd learned and practiced, because although, like I say, people think I'm a rope bondage expert, I'm really not. I'm just very well practiced at a few basic things. And I understand that the process is more about the interaction between people than it is, thank you, dude, than it is the knots or how you're tying or how it looks.
I think one of the things a lot of things I got from your workshop was the folks that were there felt like creating community in a way where vulnerability was a safe place to be.
Hmm.
And I'm curious, how do you sort of think about vulnerability and sort of creating space for people to feel vulnerable to get tied up? Because that's a very sort of like you're giving up a lot of power by
Right.
doing
Well, of
that. I'm
course, it's great
curious.
when you can create a container where people are around watching, which is sexy in my opinion, anyways, but watching for safety's sake. Then you can trust that people will be there to care if something happens, especially in an environment like that. And I think that the leather community creates those environments when we have our runs, when we have our workshops, and when we have our other events, because we've learned more than others, because we're practicing things that are BDSM, which means control and a lot of times, and consent, and maybe even pain play and other things that are, seem a bit out there. Definitely to the point where you need to have negotiated consent. I think it's important that, and I think what happens is because of that, the leather community has done a lot, the research, has taken the classes on how to do that, wants to share that with other people so that that knowledge is common. My cat's going to be walking pictures.
What's the name of your
This is,
cat?
come on over here. That's little Miss Kramer. Miss
Aww.
Kramer. She's, or Lily. We call her Lily.
That's so cute. So I'm curious, like, because one of the reasons I wanted you on my podcast was because I sort of admire the way that you have community, hold community, create community, and there's something about that to sort of be sort of not necessarily a focal point, but sort of like a funnel for folks to find space. And I'm curious, do you see yourself as sort of like a funnel or focal point, as a person who creates community and space for
Well,
folks?
I mean, I'm not blind, but it wasn't my intention necessarily. I really was just trying to have a good time and invite people into that good time. But it has grown to where people seek me out for information, and people include me in planning things, and I love doing that. So yeah, I'm happy to be involved, and I'm happy to encourage people to get involved also.
So when you're thinking about doing a workshop, what's your planning process? Or do you just sort of just go and be like, you know what, I'm just gonna like go with whatever feels good? Like, are you a planner when it comes
You
to
mean
your
for one of my
workshop?
classes? For
Yeah,
like a rope
yeah,
bondage
yeah.
class? For a rope bondage class, I really want a point of view because there's a lot of rope bondage classes. I've taken dozens and they're all so different. There's face ties, there's genital ties, there's classic Shibari. It's endless. So you can't learn it all. And I don't know it all. So I can only impart what I learn. So I usually oftentimes I'll do two different classes. I'll do essentials of rope bondage, where we really just talk about the practicality of how to handle rope, what rope, how long, etc. And then expressions of rope bondage. And that's where I really like to talk about why we're tying, how to tie, for why. First you ask, why am I tying, before you know how to tie. If you're tying for restraint, that's a completely different tie. If you're tying just for the sensual interaction, that's a different tie. If you're tying for photography because you want a beautiful image for your Instagram, which I don't do, but it's valid, if that's what people want to do. But so for me, it is about the sensual interaction. And usually I stress the sensuality of rope bondage in my expressions class. I am teaching a class at Hillside this coming weekend that I've called tension management. And it's a play on words because when you're tying, you're always maintaining the tension of the rope before you make a knot. Otherwise, the whole thing will fall apart. So when you're creating a BDSM experience with somebody, if you're doing a rope bondage experience with somebody, you're also maintaining the tension between the rigger and the bunny, the dom and the sub. You are maintaining this sort of sexual tension. First by, immediately coming forward and, invading their space. You know what I mean? Now I'm in your space, she's having the zoomies. But that's part of the experience, and that's what I try to teach and convey. That's more important than, to me, it's more important than how pretty the whole thing looks. It's more about the experience between.
Yeah. So funny story. I was dating this guy once, and on our first date, I took him to one of your classes
What was your first date?
it was our first date. It was a class. I think it was a weekend that you were doing. You're doing like a weekend class. And can I say that the amount of emotional stuff that came out in regards to being vulnerable, in regards to the container, it was definitely a mind shift for me and my partner at the time, because we afterwards we definitely stayed together for maybe about a year. But it was
But even,
but you
a successful short-term relationship is what it sounds like to me.
but you were like our first date together was
Isn't that
was
something?
was
Well,
one
I'm
of,
glad you shared that with me. That's funny. And it was good. You enjoyed it?
I
And it
did
was a
I
rope, it
did
was a rope bondage class for me.
Yeah. Yeah. He did struggle. Because I think there was at one point when I was sort of bound up. I think that the participant person I was with was sort of leading me
Oh
around,
yeah.
and that really like brought up some feelings in him, and we talked a lot about that, and I think that was just a really good way for me to realize that communication comes in various forms, right? Like there's sort of like that nonverbal communication compared to sort of like the sort of eye contact and like touch, and so there was just like layers of communication that I just was not aware of from as you were sort of describing, from the tension of the rope, from the feel of the rope, and I think you had like different textures of rope also too, which again it was very cool. I was really glad that I attended
Oh, I'm glad you did,
that
Jim.
that
Yeah, that's how we met, I believe. Yes. Yeah.
yeah.
Good. I'm glad I did that.
So I'm curious, like, how do you define terms people sort of throw around in the sense of like kink, BDSM, like for you, like, how do you sort of define those terms, and what do those terms mean to you?
Okay. So BDSM is short for bondage and discipline, dominance and submission, and sadism and masochism. So to participate in BDSM doesn't mean you involve yourself in all of those things, but in any of those elements. So that's the definition for that. As far as kink goes, kink, I think people confuse kink and fetish, and they're related. Fetish, I think, is more about an object or a body part that, if you look up
Hmm.
the definition, it'll tell you it must, like somebody with a foot fetish must have a foot thing going on or else they can't get off. It's not that. It's more they like it. All right. So to have a fetish is usually for an object or a particular body, whereas a kink, a kink is an aberration of what's expected in common. I think it's
Sort of like a like a
no
like a
more than
tab
that.
like a taboo kind of,
I'm sorry.
like a taboo kind of, or no? Yeah.
Well, I mean, some of the simplest vanilla things are taboo, some others. So I wouldn't
Yeah.
necessarily, yes, by a lot of people, considered taboo by more people than the average, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, and experimental, I think it is. And a lot of kink does have to do with the dominance and submission aspect of it, but not all. And some of it does have to do with the very fine line between pleasure and pain,
Mm.
and pushing that border until, the pain, I think, for many people is the great pleasure. So, but that's not for everyone. But there's a
Yeah.
lot of aspects of it that I think a lot of people can relate to. And if nothing else, people who are vanilla should take these classes from BDSM people just to learn how to treat each other. I'll be honest.
Mm.
That's
Yeah.
that's what I learned more than anything throughout
Yeah.
the leather events, the leather classes, the leather runs. Is people prioritize that above all else.
Yeah, I do agree with you. I feel like the folks that I've met in that community seem to be nicer. Seem to, at least the ones I've met. I'm sure there are those in the community who are not so nice, but just more genuine with themselves
Yeah,
and well,
yeah. And
which I
accepting
really
too, I think, I mean, there's clicky people everywhere, but, I
yeah.
find that in the leather and bear communities, which overlap a lot, and the drag community, the leather, bear, drag, we're over here. And, I think I think most people feel comfortable in our zones. And I think sometimes some
Yeah.
of us don't feel comfortable in some other zones.
So you were mentioning sort of like submissive and dominant. Like, how do folks sort of figure out like what's their flavor? Like, how do folks sort of figure out if I'm the dominant partner in this or if I'm the submissive partner? Is there sort of like a checklist, or is it?
When you're communicating with people, you hint at. I mean, if you're asking how do you decide for yourself, that's a different question than how do you, get into a situation. So we'll start. How do you decide for yourself? You get an inclination. You see other people experiencing it, or you fantasize about it, and you see yourself in a role. I think oftentimes people who are the boss like to be the submissive every once in a while and just be told what to do and not have to fucking make that decision. And there's an eroticism about that. I think people who oftentimes feel powerless can experience a BDSM experience, and it maybe feels them empowered and validated. And that's just off the top of my head. there are other possibilities. There's a lot of
Yeah.
reasons to pick what feels right for you. Some people are switch, and it depends on who you're around. If you're around somebody who just gives that dom vibe, it just makes you feel sub that day. And there's somebody else that's coming up to you calling you sir, and uh, giving that vibe, and it makes you feel a different way. So it's not carved in stone. It's just you shoot from the hip with that one. And then how do you convey that? Like I said, there's ways in what you're wearing in leather. The guys with the mirror caps, they're not submissive. They're not being
Yeah.
submissive then, anyways. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
People wear collars to indicate different things, but you should always ask what it indicates because it could mean anything.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Hankies, people are still doing the hanky code. So,
For folks who don't know what the Hinky code is, do you want to do a quick
oh,
little?
sure. Yeah. The hanky code comes from the 70s when cruising public places was how gays met for sex, especially if you didn't live anywhere near a gay bar. So, yeah, all the different hankies meant different things. And there's a whole list. And now the list has expanded into like colors, which has gotten a bit ridiculous and silly if you ask me. But the original hanky code, had some very simple things. Yellow meant you were into PP play. What were the red meant you were into fisting. I think black meant you were into BDSM. Dark blue was fucking, and light blue was blowjobs, I think. So there was a whole list of them. And gray meant bondage, and that's all my hankies are gray, just so that the most boring color. But I'm like, well, there it is. Okay. Yeah. I have a funny story. Actually, many years ago, I was visiting my ex. I was secretly visiting my ex-boyfriend's brother, who I was kind of dating, and he took us to the cruisy part of the park in Springfield, Massachusetts, with one of his friends. And when we got there, he tongue-in-cheek took out 3 mimeograph copies of the hanky code and handed them out to us so we could study them as we're cruising around the park. And that really made me mad.
I love that. I can't imagine. Well, I guess I can. To sort of move in a community where you feel like you're the only person, and that like there's no one else, and to sort of see like a hanky on somebody, or like a on their lapel or on
Right,
their arm,
right,
or they sort of pull it
right.
out.
Well,
It
back
must
in
feel
my
sort
day,
of
it
like,
was
oh,
an
they're.
earring in the right ear. An earring in the right ear let you know someone was gay. That was a bold way of coming out without, wearing a rainbow flag.
I didn't know
Yeah,
that.
yeah. It was right. The right earring meant you were gay, and if you had it in the left earring, it meant you were straight. It was entirely stupid, and most people didn't even know or think. But that was a way that gays could communicate to each other.
So, controversial topic. I'm curious about, like, do you feel like sometimes the leather community overprice their products, from like leather gear to spanking gear? Like, do you feel like sometimes it's overpriced due because it's such a niche community? And I get it. There's some people who specialize in making those particular products, and so I'm curious. I know, controversial, but like, do you think, like, pricing wise, that
It's expensive. I mean, I think any sex stuff, anything, any stuff, add the word sex, and you just like tripled the price of what it's worth. So yes, leather stuff is pricey. I've scoured a lot of the leather markets, and that's where you can get previously loved leathers that have a history to them, and they're worn in, and they look, lived in. And that's a great way to find bargains. But generally, it's an investment when you start looking at trying to dress like a leatherman and feel like, oh, I really showed up and looked great, which isn't that important. The leathermen that I see, some of my best friends at the leather, they really just wear jeans and t-shirts for the most part. And they have their leather vest or their leather jacket or whatever, their boots. You got to have boots. I would say invest in boots and you're golden. It's more about what you do, and it's more about the attitude of it. And it's more about, connecting in the scene and connecting with the people. But yes,
do
you
you
can
have
spend a fortune. You can.
do you have a favorite gear, or favorite outfit that it's sort of like your go-to,
Well,
or are you jeans and t-shirt
yeah,
kind of
no, I mean,
person?
I feel like I have to show up in something. If I'm hosting an event, I try to but yeah, I just got myself a beautiful pair of brown leather pants that look great with my Western look. So I'm excited about those. Yeah,
Yes. I want to see pictures.
I'll show you.
So, like, did you go to Pride? Was it
Yeah,
Albany Pride last
yes, It was last Sunday.
How
Last
was
Sunday
that?
we marched once again. I think this is maybe the sixth-ish year that we've marched in the parade since we decided we
Mhm.
could, see a parade or be a parade, right? And so we've been marching, and it's great. It's really great. We have so much fun. It just gets bigger and bigger every year. Well, we're talking about the Capitol Pride Parade in Albany, New York, and we
Yeah.
march with our Harness Albany banner, and I do the flagging, and which is exhausting but exhilarating, and yeah,
I love seeing your flag dance. I love seeing you sort of just
flagging has
like
a whole history, and I want the young guys to still see it and see how fun it is and see that it's a celebration of joy in life, and that's so important.
so what is your history with that with flagging? How did
I
you get
don't know
into
the
it?
history. I just know there is a history. I'll be honest with you. No, I mean, it goes back to festivals way back, in San Francisco, I think, the pre-AIDS and AIDS times. So it's
Mhm.
just a celebration, and it's beautiful, and it's gay, and it's fun. It's good exercise.
One of the things that I also realized when I was at that workshop you did that I took my first date on
Your first date,
was
rope bonding, first date, old.
and it wasn't until afterwards because I had like my serious face on because it was also about learning, sort of
Yep.
like the aspects of learning. And it wasn't until sort of like on the drive home that I was talking to my partner at the time. Was it really felt like play, and I don't think I've given myself permission to be able to play, have fun, and sort of let go. And I'm curious, like, do you see it as play, or is it really about like the seriousness of the space?
For me, well, I mean,
Yeah,
for me
yeah,
personally, for me, it's about the play. I like the experience. It's foreplay and it's play and it's aftercare.
yeah.
Generally, that's how I do it, and that's generally why you don't see like photos of my work much because I'm not focused on that.
Yeah.
And I'm already distracted. We're already doing something else. I'm not picking up the camera. You know. So to me, it's always been about a sensual interaction.
You mentioned aftercare. For folks who don't know what that is, do you want to explain what aftercare is?
Well, yeah, I will. Aftercare, I think, is important in any sexual interaction. It's just a matter of offering to give the other person what they need. And that might mean tender stroking. It might mean a really good, strong hug. It might mean silence. It can mean any number of things. But it's that time you take after your experience. And it's especially important if you're having BDSM experiences to negotiate. Talk about your expectations and your wants. Have your experience. Be mindful during the experience. Keep checking in. And then once your experience has come to whatever climax it has, it's important to take that time to address your partner's needs. And that's something that you talked about in pre-negotiation. You don't just wing it at the end and go, oh, my partner needs a good hard hug right now, because that's what I would need. That's not what everyone needs. So it's important to negotiate that ahead of time.
And that's the also key, and I think we've mentioned this, that it really asks you to really engage in the communication process,
Mm.
where you really have to, like you're saying, be mindful of boundaries, be mindful of just the negotiation of that particular encounter, or negotiation of that relationship, or that particular scene,
Mhm.
for lack of better words. But I think if more people allowed themselves to just talk about aftercare and multitudes of different things, I
Absolutely.
think a
It
lot of
applies
people
to
would be.
everything. It should apply to this conversation. At the end, after we're done and you hit click, we should check in on each other and see how it went. So I really think it applies to so much,
Yeah,
and it's important to talk about and think about and practice.
yeah, yeah. It's definitely, I think, a good way of learning that communication
Yeah.
communication style. So I'm curious about, like, when you're thinking about what does it mean to a community. Like, do you have space for yourself? Because it's sometimes, I guess, from the outside observer, it feels like you're engaged in a lot of things all the time. But I'm curious, like, how do you take care of yourself? Like, what are some of your either mental health practices, or if you have any spiritual practices, like, what does that look like for you when it comes to your self-care?
Well, I definitely take my time for myself, my inner thoughts and my just relaxation and the things that are important to me and my husband. I definitely do prioritize myself, my husband in my home. And then I also include people as they include themselves. I do get a lot of people reaching out to me, for questions regarding the scene and various reasons, and I have a lot of friends. So, it's a balance. It's a balance we all have to deal with, but, somebody who does events like I do does have to take the time to just be, sometimes I just wait to answer. You know what I mean? If people have reached out and they have a question, that's a valid question. And even if it's something you could have just Googled, wink, wink, I'm not going to point any fingers, but I'm still happy. I'm still happy to look for that. This is how I've learned a lot, is because over the years, since I created the Leather Group, people have expected that I know a lot. And so I've looked up a lot because people ask me, and I'm happy to do it. I don't mean it to sound like I'm complaining, but people do think that I know more than because I'm some sort of expert. But I forgot my point. What was my point?
No. The self-care piece for you. That.
No, it
what,
is.
what
It's
does that?
important to prioritize yourself really first, and then your loved ones in your home. And so I do.
Yeah.
Oh, I have one plug I want to give. So last year we created Harness Albany, my leather group, produced and I directed and created our first erotic short film named Cockloft, and I have it on good word that it's been accepted at the Cinekink New York City Film Festival this season. So I'm very excited about that, and I'm hoping that people will be able to find it and see it.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you want to share a little bit of what it's about?
Yes, it's a short film.
First, start with like what prompted the idea
Okay.
to do
So
this.
yeah, I mentioned earlier that I listen to Dan Savage, and Dan Savage has this Hump Film Festival, which is a great thing. And I thought, well, they do amateur films. I wonder if we could do an amateur film. So we did. We put together a short film that cost us no money, thank God. And we did it here at the house. And it's about having your boy over to have a rope bond experience up in the attic. And Cockloft is a synonym for attic. So it's a short film where I tie up a friend of mine, and it's sexy, and we found some duty-free music and put it in just the right places. And I'm really, really proud of it. And like I say, I heard I have it on good word that it's definitely in the festival. So I'm very excited.
Nice. Definitely give me the link, and I'll add it here when I post
Yeah,
it, so
once
folks
they
could.
find the venue where they're going to, host it. I think that I had to ask because I met one of the judges a few months ago by chance when I was at one of the leather events in Pennsylvania. And he told me that he had heard about the film, and it was actually one of his friends is my friend that I tied up. So there's a few coincidences there, and I'm sure he pushed it in just because his friend is in it. But really, it's a very good little film, and I hope everyone gets a chance to see it. Cockloft.
Nice. I'm excited. Like, how many folks are in it? It's just you and one other person?
Just me and Jeff K, JR and Jeff K. That's how we do it. So yeah, it's fun. It's fun.
Was it like a 1 day filming, or was it like multiple days, or?
We did it in 2 days. We shot most of the footage in 1 day, and then we did a rough cut and looked through and decided there were a few elements there was one or two that we wanted to reshoot and one or two that we felt needed to be additional. So yeah, we really, it was actually, the pressure to do it was because it was in November. I think it was in early November. The deadline for Hump Film Festival submissions was early December. So we thought, can we do it in a month? Can we just put a film together in a month? And we did, and it was amazing. And we were fighting against, the weather. It was 45 degrees out, and I was making Jeff get naked on the back porch. So he was a little grumpy about that, but we got the shot. Cut, print, Emmy. So we'll see.
It's interesting because it's one of those things where it's like you're filming, but yet you're also engaging in something that you're doing, but it's like multiple personalities, right? Like thinking about this.
Well, the thing is I'm not a director, and I'm not a writer, and I'm not an actor. And I decided I was going to write, direct, and act in a short film. And I thought, well, how could I possibly do that? And the only way I could think of that I would do that is if I just did something with very little dialogue that would happen. And I thought, well, here's a thing that has happened. People that want to do the rope bondage thing, I've had them come over and walk through and get undressed there and come up, and then I tie, and I'm like, I'll just do that without thinking about it. And fortunately, I got a brilliant photographer that captured it and knew a lot of beautiful ways to capture the story that I was trying to tell. Yeah,
Nice.
I'm exorbitantly proud of it, and I do hope everybody gets to see Cockloft at Cinecake, New York City, 2025.
You heard it here, folks. I forgot to ask because I usually do that. I usually start off with asking folks what's something that you're curious about. It doesn't necessarily be about anything that we've talked about. Just in general, what is a thing or things that you're just curious about and just want to learn more?
I mean, I think you can find curiosity anywhere. I can't think of anything specific. When I'm curious about something, I do kind of go for it and really just kind of sink myself into it for a while, like I did with rope bondage. You know, like gardening, you know, is another passion of mine, and so I'm always thinking about the evolution of that, and I'm curious to see what it's just going to grow into, how it's going to evolve. So, you know, just I think remain curious every day.
Nice. So we're getting ready to end. Any other places that folks could try to find you or like your classes? I know you said you have a class that's coming up in Hillside.
Yeah, well,
So
I'm
folks
doing a
want
class at
to,
Hillside Campground this weekend, so you can come there. We're hosting our 12th annual harness party at Hillside. So come that Saturday, I believe it's Saturday the 28th. Sounds correct. And so you can find me there. I suppose you could follow me on Facebook. I don't know. No, I don't need any of that. I just you know, pop in and say hi. I got enough followers. Don't follow. Leave me alone for a minute. You know, I'm busy.
well, I'm glad you allowed me to bother you
Yeah,
for
no, it was
this
no bother. I
particular.
really enjoyed it. It was good to talk with you.
Well, Jay, it was really nice talking to
Thank
you,
you.
and thank you so much for giving me your.
It's my pleasure. Absolutely.
Hey, folks. I will see you in another segment of All Wise Transformation.